As you probably already know, Nvidia is one of the best performing stocks in the market this year and last 6 months and last year as well. In fact, if you go back several years, Nvidia stock has performed exponentially well. So I've got a shocking statement to make here relating to Nvidia stock and AMD stock, right? AMD hasn't performed as well as Nvidia. And you might think Nvidia stock is more expensive than AMD stock, considering how much Nvidia stock has increased in recent months and recent years compared to AMD stock. So you might be surprised at what I'm going to say in this video here. So without further ado, let's jump into this interesting comparison here between Nvidia and AMD and my conclusion that might surprise you. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. So like I mentioned, Nvidia stock has performed remarkably well in recent weeks and recent months and recent years. If you look at just year to date so far in 2024, Nvidia stock is up 82.39%. Compare that to AMD, which is only up 24.25% for the year. So given these two numbers, you might say, well, AMD stock is not as expensive as Nvidia stock because it hasn't increased by as much, and so it doesn't have that benefit priced into the valuation. And I would disagree with you, and that would be a surprise to some investors. Some investors might think AMD is a better value compared to Nvidia given this underperformance. And my shocking conclusion and my statement is that no, that's not true for my opinion. I think Nvidia is still a better value compared to AMD, and I'm going to share with you all the details why I think that's the case. So starting with revenue growth, if you look at the last 3 years, AMD and Nvidia, they've been following a similar trajectory here. In fact, Nvidia was performing worse than AMD from about January of 2022 to about, let's say, February of 2023. You could see Nvidia in the orange line here and AMD in the purple line. In terms of revenue growth, AMD was demonstrating better revenue growth than Nvidia. That was up until mid-2023 when Nvidia's revenue growth absolutely surged, driven by demand to develop AI models, large language models. AMD's revenue growth exploded higher, and now it recently up to 265% compared to just 10% for AMD. So if you look at justification for why Nvidia's stock price is up, you can look at revenue growth and justify that increase in price. But as I usually say, looking at revenue growth alone doesn't tell enough of the story. You can't make an investing decision based on revenue growth alone. In fact, a lot of investors got burned in the last few years by investing in these unprofitable growth stocks that demonstrated strong growth. You can think of all of these EV companies that demonstrated strong growth, and investors jumped into those, fooled by that revenue growth, and unfortunately that has not turned out well. Along with EV companies, the EV charging companies similarly are demonstrating strong revenue growth, but just by revenue growth alone, it hasn't been enough. Those stocks are also down significantly off their highs. So what you want to look at in addition to revenue growth is profitability. Are these companies demonstrating profitability along with the revenue growth? Because it's not that difficult to grow revenue if you're willing to absorb massive losses on the bottom line. Any of you watching can offer your products or services to customers at a very, very low price, and you'll attract many, many buyers if you're willing to sell your product or service at a huge loss. That's what many of these unprofitable growth companies are doing. They're generating excellent growth because they're pricing their products so low to entice consumers to buy, but that's not enough to generate profit for the business, and so it's not a sustainable business. That's not the case for Nvidia. Nvidia's operating income has surged along with its revenue. You can see that here in this chart, and look at compared to AMD, which has yet to experience that surge in profitability, that surge in revenue. from demand from artificial intelligence. Although it is poised to do so, it just hasn't done so yet. Look at Nvidia's operating income jumping to 13.61 billion, up from less than 2.5 billion, and similar to where AMD was. If you go back to July of 2022, look at this point here. Their operating income was very close, and then Nvidia took off, and it's off to the races, and Nvidia is way ahead of AMD. So considering that Nvidia generated 13.6 billion in income, operating income, compared to AMD's paltry 342 million, you can understand why Nvidia stock has outperformed AMD so phenomenally. And similar story can be said for cash flow from operations. In fact, there was moments in 2022 where AMD was generating better cash flow from operations before Nvidia's surged again up to 11.5 billion. So you can see this big difference between Nvidia's performance in the critical business metrics, that is revenue, profit, and cash flow, arguably the three most important business metrics to consider. Nvidia is trouncing AMD in those metrics. So you can understand Nvidia's stock price increases. If anything, I would think that Nvidia's stock price would be outperforming AMD by a larger margin, considering the margin of outperformance in business fundamentals, Nvidia compared to AMD. And if you look forward, let's say if we're not looking backward, these are all backward looking results, right? This is what happened last quarter and last year and the previous years, right? So let's look ahead. If we look ahead, investors on Wall Street expect AMD to deliver 24.96% earnings per share growth per year over the next 5 years. That's a really strong earnings per share growth forecast for 5 years. Don't get me wrong, that's impressive on its own. It's just that if you compare AMD to Nvidia, it makes Nvidia look small again, right? Because investors on Wall Street or analysts on Wall Street expect Nvidia to deliver 37.89% earnings per share growth over the next 5 years. So whether you're looking at the last few years or whether you're looking at the next 5 years, Nvidia's performance was better than AMD and is expected to be better than AMD. So you can understand again why Nvidia is outperforming AMD. In fact, if you look at valuation, AMD is trading at a more expensive valuation than Nvidia. It's trading at a forward PE of 33 compared to Nvidia, which is trading at a forward PE of 30. So yeah, I think Nvidia is a better value than AMD. I think Nvidia is cheaper than AMD because of all of these metrics I'm looking at suggests I'm getting a better value for Nvidia stock versus what I'm getting with AMD stock. Even though acknowledging that Nvidia has outperformed AMD in recent periods, I still think Nvidia is a better buy. I still think Nvidia is cheaper than AMD because all the business performance metrics suggest that to be the case. This isn't just hype surrounding artificial intelligence. It's actual results from artificial intelligence. So those are two different things. If this was just fueled by enthusiasm and momentum and not by actual numbers, actual revenue, profits, and cash flow, I would be saying a much different story here. But this is actually fundamentally justified by the surge in revenue and profits and cash flow as I've just shared with you here. So that might be surprising to some of you, but according to the numbers that I'm seeing, I think Nvidia is undervalued compared to AMD. Now, mind you, I do have both of these stocks rated as a buy. I do have both of these stocks rated as two of my top stocks to buy. They're both excellent, right? I shared with you their excellent prospects. It's just I think Nvidia is better than AMD. Before I let you go, let me tell you about the greatest deal on YouTube. With just a click of a button, you can get free financial analysis from a professor with decades of investing experience. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.